Welcome back to another sewing tutorial. Today I'm going to make the terry dress, which is a towel dress you can wear over your bikini or bathing suit. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Leah. I studied fashion design, pattern making and worked as a seamstress for 3 years. And now I'm going to show you how you can make your clothes yourself. For this dress you need a towel or two depending on the size you're going to make, or just a really big towel. Mine is quite big as well, but it's almost too small, so we'll see. And I also have to pay attention because the pattern is kind of cut in half, so I can't place the pattern anywhere, which makes it a bit more difficult to cut. But you can also just buy towel fabric or use a vintage towel, which is also really cool. And I'd say let's start. I have printed and taped together my pattern already, and I've also cut it out. But if you are printing it, just make sure you choose the box print 100%, so you have the sizing right, and then you can, with the sizing chart, choose your perfect size and cut it out. If you want some more guidance on how I tape it together and cut it out, you can go to an older video, for example the linen shorts. Now, because this fabric is so thick, I'm not gonna fold it to cut it double layered already. I'm just gonna cut it twice instead. And also because it's a bit tight with the fabric, I am going to use the end of the towel as my seam. When you're cutting with scissors, you should pin even more generously, and just generally pin enough when cutting, because you don't want the pattern to move, so you have the exact measurements of the dress. And then you can just follow the edge of the pattern, because the seam allowance is already in there. When you are cutting darts, just make a little triangle so it lies flat when sewing it. Now for the back piece, this you need to cut on fold. So now I have the front piece 2 times and the back piece on fold. Now I'm also marking the darts on both front pieces. For this dress you also need bias tape, but I couldn't find a color that went with it, so I'm making the bias tape myself. And for that I bought this fabric and I've folded it with a 90 degrees angle, so it's stretchy. So the thread running goes actually this way. And now I can just cut. I need it 4 centimeters wide, and because it's on fold, I can just cut 2 centimeters. So here I have the first strap of bias tape, and now I need some more because we need it for the front and also for the armholes. So since this one's not folded anymore, I'm just doing 4 centimeters, and I'll iron off them. To make the bias tape, I'm just folding the fabric in half and iron it flat. And then I am ironing it towards the middle. Now if you have a bias tape maker, it's a bit faster, but this works just fine. Same from the other side. And then in half again, like this. Now when you make your bias tape yourself, there might be the chance that it is not long enough. Then you have to put it together, and that you always do diagonally, like this. Now when you have it like this, you can just take it and move it for as much as you're going to have the side seam, which is for me like this, and then I'm just pinning it. And when folding it apart, I have it continuing bias tape when I'm finished. Now I can pin the darts into 2 front pieces, and for that I am starting at the tip, and the pins are facing this way, so I have an easier time sewing it together. This I'm doing on the left side of the fabric. Now I'm ready to sew the darts, and for that I'm starting at the edge and I'm finishing just here and the very tip. If I go this direction, I can go much closer to the edge, which makes for a nicer dart. And I'm also doing a few back and forth stitches at the beginning and at the end. Now this fabric is very thick, so just be careful and don't sew too fast, depending on what kind of sewing machine you have. Now I'm ironing both darts upwards. With fabric like this, might be a bit difficult to iron, but I would still do it so it lies nice up flat, like this. Now I can pin the shoulder seam, and for that I am putting the nice side of the fabric onto the nice side of the fabric, so the darts are up and the nice side of the fabric from the back piece is inside. This might look a bit confusing with my fabric now, because I chose to have the back of the dress dark and the front light, but just be sure that you pin the sides you want outside of your finished piece. They need to be inside right now. Then you can pin both shoulders. And now we can sew them together with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Now you can do a zigzag stitch over the edge, or you can do an overlock. Because this fabric is so thick, I am going to iron it apart, therefore I'm just overlocking the sides separately. I'm also overlocking the sides, and that I'm doing from the nice side of the fabric. Again, if you don't have an overlocker, you can just do a zigzag stitch. Now when you come to the dart, just make sure it's facing the right direction. Now you can pin the side seams together, but here you have to be careful and remember the marking for the waist. So when sewing, you'll stop and leave about 1 centimeter open, and always do a few back and forth stitches. For the opening, you can do that on both sides, or you can only do it on one side, but you need it on the top layer, the one you fold over the other side, so that the band can go through and you can tie it at the waist. And if you do it on both sides, you can wrap it both ways. And of course, always pin the nice side of the fabric onto the nice side. So this colorway is my decision, so don't be confused with that. But yeah, just be sure that the nice side of the dart is facing inwards and the nice side of the back fabric is facing the finished side of the darts. And this, of course, for both sides. Again, here as well, the outside now when pinning is the raw side. I'm leaving about 1.5 centimeters open so that I can comfortably pull the ribbon through when wrapping my dress. And you can leave that open on both sides in the beginning, and you can easily close it later. Just you have to have it on one side at least, but you can also do it now on both sides and later on the side if you want to close it. Here I'm using stitch length 2.5, and I have 1 centimeter seam allowance again, and I do a few back and forth stitches at the beginning and at the end. Now when I'm at the pins where I've marked for the opening, I do again a few back stitches, and then I start underneath, doing a few back stitches to the opening, but leave the 1.5 centimeter open, and then continue with 1 centimeter seam allowance to the bottom. Now you can iron both side seams apart. For the ends of your overlock threads, you can just use a bit of a bigger needle and then pull it into the seam so it doesn't open up again. I can't find mine at the moment, so I'm just yeah, telling you. So one way you can do the ribbons is like this. And for that you need to pull the threads longer than the bicep is, and fold it and put it in the middle here, and then you can just sew it close. Like this, and here you have to be careful that you are not sewing on top of the thread. And now I'm cutting back the edge here a little bit, and also the seam allowance. But here, just be careful you're not cutting off the threads you just pulled in. And then for the rest of the strap, you can also cut back the seam allowance a little bit. And now I'm doing a zigzag stitch over the edge just to be sure it keeps nice in the wash. Then it should look like this, and you can also cut back the threads of the zigzag stitch, but just be careful not of your thread to pull through. And then you can take the end and pull carefully. So now often bias tape is a little hard to turn because it's not very slippery, but just do it carefully and then maybe wiggle it in a little bit at the start. And then you can massage the corner out here, and then you can quickly iron it nice and flat, and you have ribbons. Now I'm preparing the ribbons to tie the dress, and with these two pieces of the bias tape, I've cut the endings straight. For both of these, I'm folding 1 centimeter in. On one side, and then I'm folding the bias tape just as is, like this. And now I'm going to follow the edge with a little bit of a longer stitch with stitch length about 3.5 to 4. You can do the strap and turn it inside out with a safety pin or a loop turner. Now with the nice side of the fabric facing upwards, you can pin the bias tape onto your dress and just stop at the corner here, so just pin until here for now. So to add the ribbon, I am pinning it 1 centimeter below the corner of the neckline. So this part is the neckline, this is the side of the dress, the middle, and I'm just pinning it on here. Here is the edge, like this, and I'm pinning the bias tape right on top, like this. Now I'm sewing on the bias tape with 1 centimeter seam allowance, and at the start I did a few back stitches, and I'm only going until the corner we've just pinned. Now when I'm coming to the corner, I'll stop right before about 5 millimeter, turn the piece and sew directly into the corner, like this. Then I can pull the bias tape towards the edge here, parallel, and fold it down here. And then with 1 centimeter seam allowance, I just start sewing it on again. Same thing on the other corner. Now when I've sewn around and I'm done with the bias tape, I can iron it open. And then I have this 1 centimeter that I've left. I can fold it in, and then I'm folding in the crease I've pre-ironed that I'll just fold down as pre-ironed as well. And then I can fold it back like this. Pin it. And I can continue to do so all around. So I'll have a clean finish at the end. Now when I've pinned down the bias tape, I can follow the edge with a bit of a longer stitch. And from the side it should look like that. Now for the armholes, I'm starting to pin with a little bit left over at the bottom. Here I'm just checking that the seam allowance lies nice and flat, and I'll just pin here. Then I'm just going all around. Now to finish the bias tape for the armhole, I have folded in this part along the edge here and this part like this. Now I know how long this part should be, so for that I of course also want the right finish. So here I've marked where they need to be sewn together. Now I'm adding the seam allowance. It's about 7 millimeters, and then I choose the right angle and mark it like this. Now I can cut it off. Here I also have the marking where it needs to start with the sewing, and now I need the angle like this. If I put this on top of it, I can see it really well. So I'm taking here a few out, and now I'm again adding the seam allowance. And drawing the angle. Oh, here we're not drawing the angle with the seam allowance like this, and then I can cut it off. Now again I can pin it together like this and sew it together. Then it should look like this. And sew it on as I did before. Now with the armhole as well, I can iron it open. The same as before. Here I'm also folding it in, folding it down, and folding it in like this. And now I can pin all around. Now I've pinned the armhole all around, and with a little bit of a longer stitch I can sew it down. Now it should look like this.